Welcome to the CAD Office Training Guide series for FDOTConnect. I'm John Mark Palacios, CAD Applications Engineer. Today, I'll be going through the FDOTConnect Roadway Design 3D Modeling Guide. In this course, we will learn the Bentley Open Roads Designer Connect Edition tools for design and 3D modeling within the FDOTConnect workspace. In this series of videos, I will take you step by step through each exercise from the guide. Today we're going to go over Chapter 2 of the guide, Basic Corridor Modeling. This is going to be the first part, and we're going to create corridors based on the templates that we did in the previous chapter and the templates that are already created for you. So let's take a look what we're going to cover. So first we're going to take a look at model management plan, how we want to set one up, what that entails, and a little bit on kind of the concept of corridors and the intervals, the template drop interval, I guess I should call it. And then we're going to go through the exercises, which is going to be creating a corridor model, adding corridor references to be able to tie that model to other things, setting the corridor feature definition, which primarily affects that template drop interval, and adding key stations, which will basically is a manual way to add more template drops where you need more detail or to correct some issues, correct gaps and that sort of thing. And looking at corridor objects, which kind of can look at all the other things that we create, and then adding parametric constraints, which will allow us to also kind of manually override some conditions and make some changes. In this case, we actually are going to use it for the medians, but there's a few different things we can use it for. All right, so let's take a look. First of all, the way the corridor is created, it's like, think of like average end area. If you remember the concept from, basic engineering, at least I was taught it in university. I assume most people were, but maybe not. But the basic concept is, you take the cross section and it's over a certain area. So for average end area, it's every 100 feet you cut a cross section. Well, we're taking the reverse of that when we build 3D modeling. So they're basically taking the cross section. We're setting that interval, which is much tighter than 100 feet to get more detail, and we're then extrapolating connecting the points between every intersection, so like your edge of pavement point, things like that. We're building those out, and then those become lines, and through that we build a 3D shape. And then if it's a line or a polygon in the cross section, then it becomes a surface or a shape in 3D. So it's extrapolating everything out. So the interval is actually pretty important as to the level of detail. If you go around curves, it's going to have straight lines between each interval. So we do have in the CAD manual a maximum spacing depending on the context classification of the roadway. So this table right here is taken straight out of the CAD manual. It may not look as pretty in the CAD manual, but certainly something you should get familiar with. In current version of the CAD manual for FDOTConnect, it's in 5.16.7 in that section. That has moved, if you're familiar with where it was in the previous versions. I think it was in Chapter 8. But take a look at what your context classification is. So for this particular project, I think it's a C3. I want to say it's a C3C offhand. And regardless, I know we've looked it up, and it's using this 20 feet as a maximum interval. So that's what we're going to be setting it to when we build our corridors. And the one thing that you see over here is there's a different one for tangent, different one for curve, different one for intersection. So tangent and curve would be the ones usually for a corridor that you're concerned with. I would not worry a whole lot about the curve, because if you set the tangent, if you set your template drop interval when you build a corridor to that, there are options on the corridor feature definitions that will increase the interval for the curve. So if you're using the final feature definition, it will do that. It will automatically say, okay, there's a curve on the alignment, so let me add more template drops. It calls it densify curves, densify horizontal, and you can even densify for vertical curves and other key points like that. So this should be taken care of. Primarily should be concerned with this. The one thing that you may need to take a look at is intersections. So these are going to be for when you're doing detail modeling, which we'll get to in chapter 4. But when you're doing detail modeling, you may want to set this to 5, for example, for this particular project, or depending on what your context class is. Again, you're probably going to, that's things like your radius returns for curves and things like that they're a lot tighter curve. You know, you're talking like 20, 15 foot, 25 foot radius in that range. So you need a tighter interval to be able to follow that curve a little bit better. The thing to keep in mind with this is you could go tighter. I mean, if you want to make everything a 1 foot interval on the tangent, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to have a performance impact. It's going to slow you down a lot. You know, ORD is 64-bit. It can handle more. It can handle more memory, but it will still slow down if you make this interval too tight, and especially on longer projects. So the key thing is just to have something that's appropriate for the project and for the context. So there may be some needs where you say, well, there's some tight corners here. I need to tighten things up, or there's some other need, you know, just a tight radius on the main line that you feel like the curve needs to be tighter on the curve. You know, you can tighten it up for reasons like that. This is kind of a starting point. That's why we've said, okay, urban areas like C6, we expect it's going to need to be tighter, so we went ahead and reduced the maximum. So this is probably a good starting point on this table. If in doubt, just go by that. If you see once you've built it and once you've gone to the final corridor feature definition, and you see that it's getting a little blocky, like it's cutting off curves, then you can worry about changing that template drop interval. Let me pause for a sec. All right, so let's take a look at the model management plan. So this is an example. This is pulled straight from the training guide on page 2-2. But this is an example of what a model management plan would possibly look like. It's not saying it needs to look like this, but so basically the concept is we have multiple model files that we're going to create. So for this particular project, we're going to have a main line. We're going to have we have two different alignments. So we got the main line on the main alignment project. We have the 61, and then we have the US 98 alignment. And then we have a detail model. This is going to get all the intersection details as well as the end conditions for the main line. All of those are fine to keep separate, and very often on more complex projects, you're going to have multiple. You're going to have a lot of these. You probably have more than just 3. Depends on the length of your project. You may need to split it along the corridor if it gets too long, just to break things up and not have too much of a performance hit. That's perfectly fine. Break it up however you want. The key thing is to have this plan to be able to show how it's broken up. So anybody that's reviewing your project, whether it be face submittal reviewers or even if it's a contractor that needs to access the CAD files, they need to know what's where. We do have a master model, and that's certainly something you need to have. And that you're going to reference in, if you have multiple models, you reference everything into that master model file. And that way, a reviewer should theoretically just be able to open the master model and see the whole project. And this will also come in handy when you get to, say, visualization. And that's, I think, the last chapter that we'll cover in this course, chapter 7. believe is a visualization chapter, and basically you'll take the whole file and put it in LumenRT. You can do a VR review, and you want everything in one, so you can see it all right there, and that's perfectly fine. So the key thing is, again, show it, say what file it is. So really just need to have that information, what file it is, where it is. You might have more visual than this. I mean, this is just a diagram. You may have a map, especially if it's a more complex project, to say, this, show the alignment and say from here to here, it's this model file, from here to here, it's this model file. That might be something to consider. It's also helpful to have all the other files. So these would be the ones that are referenced. So all of these files probably reference all of these. So you got the alignment, your 2D design, existing survey, and then you have your existing features models, both for just pavement and sidewalk, etc. And this one would be like existing utility, existing drainage. Usually be different model files. I should say here's one of the differences. The alignment file in ORD is going to have super elevation. It's going to have 2D horizontal alignments as well as vertical alignments. So alignments, profile, and super elevation all goes in the alignment file. And it's all good to keep in mind what is where, and basically the management plan is let somebody who's not familiar with your project whatsoever be able to open up that management plan and be able to figure out what file they need to open based on what they need to review. So let's start getting into the exercises here. All right, so if you are still doing this from the previous chapter's exercise, you may already have the MODL RD mainline 61 file open. If not, just open up ORD. Make sure you have the work set selected, 2209455-201_CE, and open up the MODL RD mainline 61.dgn that we created in the last time. And it's blank. There's nothing in here right now. So we're going to exercise 2.1, page 2-1. We're going to go ahead and attach the references that we need. So I'm going to go over here to the Home tab, and I'm going to go to Attach. This command right here in the middle of Primary section. I'm going to do Attach Reference when that reference dialog pops up. I'm going to reference, I need the alignment file, so ALGNRDO1.dgn. I need the DSGNRDO1, that's my 2D design. And that's it from the Roadway folder. So I'm selecting two, I'm just holding Control to select multiple, so you can just select one, hold down Control, and select the other one. Just makes it a little quicker so I don't have to open this to run attach references as many times. So when you have the two selected, just click Open. The default model, everything should be good for this, so just click OK on both of those. And then we need one more. We need the existing ground to be able to tie to everything. Main things you need when you're going to build a corridor model is you're going to need a alignment with a profile. So that's coming from the ALGNRDO1. And you can see that if I fit view, you can see there's my alignment. Profile's in there as well. And you need the existing ground. The design is also very useful because we usually end up tying features to the 2D using corridor references. So you probably need those three minimum. So I'm going to go back to attach reference right here. Now I'm going to go to the ServRD folder under the survey. Now I'm going to attach the GDTM RDO1. For some projects, that existing ground is in the ServRD, but in the previous courses, that was split out to create a separate GDTM RDO1 with just the existing ground. So since this is a bit cleaner, I'm just going to attach this. We don't really need anything else from the serve RD. Just try to be consistent in the workflow so everything's coming from the same source. So if you have multiple model files, don't reference in the existing ground from the serve RD in one and the GDTM RD in the other. Just use the same source for all of them so that if you need to change something, because I've seen projects where everything gets updated, they do another survey because there was issues or whatever in the middle of the project, then you just update the GDTM RD and everything else should update to follow suit. So I'm going to select the GDTM RD01 and click open. That's default model. It's good to go. Now I do want to. There's a couple things I want to check. Let's make this terrain model active. So this is going to be step 4. Just changing my element selection to make sure that's individual, so I can see the boundary. So here's my terrain model, existing ground. So if you click on that and hover over it, or just hover over it, you can get this little pop-up menu. Should show this option here to set as active terrain model. There's also, that's one way to do it. So the way it's shown in here in step 3 is we go to the terrain tab. So let's do that route. So right here, second tab in the ribbon, terrain, click on that. And then come over here to the edit section of the terrain tab of the ribbon. And then you want to go to this button here. It says active. So for these buttons, just remember the split button. If you click this, you don't always know what you're getting. So sometimes it's good, especially the first time you run the command, to click the drop down. So set active is the first one in the list. So if you haven't run anything in this list, it's always going to be the first one that the button resolves to. So I click the drop down and just click select set active. And it asks me to locate terrain model to set as active. So that's going to be, just select this boundary as existing ground here. And if you hover over it now, you can verify that it is active, because now this menu, it says clear active terrain model. So it's changed. And the other thing I want to check is to make sure we have a profile on the alignment. So this green right here is our centerline alignment. So if I hover over that, I can see there's an active profile. So that's good to know. There's no stationing on this alignment. So just to make life a little bit easier, I'm gonna annotate that real quick. So let's go to the drawing production tab, it's right here, another ribbon. And then over here to element annotation, I'm just going to click the drop down and make sure I'm selecting the right thing, which is annotate element, the first one on the list. And just select that center line and reset. Now it's got stationing labeled in here for me. So just make it a little bit easier when I'm looking at it visually to know what station I'm working around. All right, so we got stationing, and we've got design, we've got our profiles, and we've got our existing ground active. So I think we should be good to go. Now let's set up the views though first. So there's a couple ways. You have the function keys. If you like doing function key, you can just hit F2 to do a 2D and 3D view. I'm going to show you one other way. If you right click in this window and hold down, it brings up this little pop-up menu, and the second option here is view control, and there's a whole bunch of views that you can bring up. These are our presets, and these are the same as the function keys, but there's a few extra options. I think there's only like 4 in the function keys. So I'm just going to go right here. I can do views, plan, and 3D. So second option. So here's my 2D view. Here's the 3D view. It looks pretty good. So if that's set like you want it, everything's showing that you want shown, You know you have, this is another way you can know you have profiles too. If you see it in the 3D, then that's a profile. So we know we have profiles on these alignments. So if you notice everything's set, just save settings. So that if we close the file out, it'll come back here. And then we can go on to exercise 2.2, page 2-2, create corridor. So we're going to come over here to the corridors tab. Most of the tools we're going to use are going to be from this tab. And then we're going to come over here to the new corridor, which is really the leftmost. So these are the standard buttons that are on most all the toolbars. You got the element selection particularly, but you also have the Explorer and attached tools and properties. So the specific to this ribbon, or sorry, to this tab of the ribbon, you can see this part is pretty much the same no matter which tab you select. But specific to this one, the leftmost is the first one, and that's kind of generally the workflow is you start on the left and work your way over. So that's not always the case, but in general, that's the logic of how these were set up. So we can go over here to new corridor, first button on the list. And note, it asks you to locate the corridor baseline. So that's going to be the center line for CL-SR61. Select that. And it says locate profile or reset for active profile. So I'm going to reset. And it asks you for a feature name. This is going to be the name of the corridor. So I'm going to call it State Road 61, SR61, around there. And I just hit enter, and it's going to go to the next part of the command. So really the corridor part is done. So it goes straight into creating a template. If for some reason it goes out of command, you would just come over here to new template drop and select this boundary. This is a corridor handle with nothing in it. It's just a square. But because it already went straight to the next tool, we're going to go ahead and just use that. So that brings us down to step 6. So we have the create template drop. The dialog open over here, and it's asking us to select a template. You can do the Alt-Down keyboard shortcut if you want, if you like running things from the keyboard, or you can click the 3 dots right here in the bottom right corner of this dialog, and that'll bring up the pick template window. Alt-Down will also bring this up. And let's go into corridor templates, and we're going to do the SR61 inside TS. So this is, well, 2 things to be aware of on this one. We're just doing the main line on this, so it stops at the curve. Let's see if this will get any bigger. First thing, by the way, you need to verify your path up here. Make sure it has the right ITL file. If it doesn't, you can just do the open up create template and open up the correct ITL. But it'll open by default the one that matches the name of your project. So that's generally the ITL one you want to use, but there may be some reasons that you have multiple ITLs or something in your project that you need more than one. For example, for this one, we created one in the previous exercise and purposely did not name it the same because this one was already created for you. And this way you don't have to worry about if it was done correctly or not. All right, so the other thing is, so this is just the main line. The curb is split out. So we have the left side and the right side, and we're going to do that in the next part of this. But for this one, what we're going to do is we have the traffic separator one and we have the curb one. It's 2 different templates. So we have these 2 turn lanes on the end, on each kind of bookending this section, this corridor that we're going to build, and that has a traffic separator, and then it goes to median curb. So we're going to put the traffic separator as the first template drop, then we're going to put the median curb, then back to the traffic separator. So the beginning and end is going to be the same template drop, but you have to run this 3 times because it's three different drops. All right, so, and just to elaborate, if you did the SS4, SS10 version of this, you probably had something that looked more like this, and this is the SR61 inside that had the traffic separator and the median curve all in one template. And that usually works well, but we ran into some issues with when we applied super elevation. This wasn't working right because of the 2 end conditions, it appeared. So the solution, the workaround was just split it up so we just have the 1 end condition. This is a end condition that looks for in this case, looks for a type E curb, and for this one, it looks for a traffic separator. And I guess for some reason, I'm not entirely clear why. It might be a Bentley defect in ORD, but for some reason, it did not apply the super elevation correctly, and when it was all in one like this. So this sometimes is easier when you're building templates to just have just change out different template drop. But it is easier to have it all in one corridor because when you work with it, if it's linear like this, it's easier to have one corridor so that when you work with it and you're doing like point controls, parametric constraints, things like that, you only have to apply those one time for the length of the project if it's something that extends the length of the corridor, I should say. Maybe not the length of the project. So just keep in mind. All right, so we're going to do step 7, SR61 inside TS is what we're selecting. And then I click OK over here. And go ahead and accept that. Now we want a start station. So this needs to start where the traffic separator starts. Don't worry about the nose because we're going to do that in the detailed modeling chapter with a civil cell. It's hard to get with a corridor because of the curve. So we just snap to this point right here where the nose meets the tangent. 700 plus 700 plus 71. There we go. So just snap to that for the start, and then ask for the end station. So go down to the end of the traffic separator and just snap to the end of it. So it's 703 plus 71. The drop interval needs to be 20. And this is what we're saying. This is based on the template drop interval requirements based on your context classification and the table from the CAD manual that we showed earlier. So I set that drop interval to 20. I accept that. Then it builds it. And you've got the 3D open. You should see some pavement getting dropped in there. All right, and it's still in this command, so that makes it a little bit easier. This is going down to the next step. So I'm going to go step 10. So basically, I'm repeating the same steps, but I'm just going to pick the other one. So I'm going to go over here, click the 3 dots again. I'm going to pick the inside median curve this time, and then I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to accept that. And now my start station snap to where the other one just ended, right where the traffic separator ends and the curve starts. 703 plus 71. And then for the end, come down here around the curve, snap it to this end station where the curb ends and the traffic separator begins. So it looks like it's 711 plus 88.90. And then that drop interval at 20. So you notice that even though it's the same corridor, for each template drop, if you need to, for some reason, change the drop interval because you need more detail on one of them, that's perfectly acceptable too. So that's a good to know if you need it. So built that one. You can see the pavement's in there. Now we just need to do one more. So I'm going to go back to the pick template, clicking the three dots or alt down. And I'm going to go back to the SR61 inside TS, the traffic separator one. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to select where the last one ended off, or last one ended. Snap to that again. Oh, sorry. I got to accept that first. Then it asked me for the start station. Now I can snap to it. So I noticed it wants to snap to that line in the corridor. I don't really want to snap it to there. You might have to use a tentative click if it doesn't get in the right place. So there we go. 711 plus the 88.90 snapping to the traffic separator line. And then I'm going to lock to the end. Or sorry, not lock to the end, but I'm going to snap to the end. So the end, we want to go beyond this traffic separator. We want to go, let's go to this radius return over here. So these templates are set up. They can switch from traffic separator to pavement. So you'll see that happen on the end. So it's good to see that as well. So we're going to just find this radius return on the left side where this side street is, and it's snapped to that. So 714 plus 23.96. Same drop interval, still 20, and accept that. So now it should go pretty much from this side street to this intersection or near it. We're gonna complete the intersection with detail modeling, so don't want to go all the way to it. And that should be it for the template drops. And let's see. I guess there's a couple things that you want to, if you go down to the next down pages on this exercise, page 2-7, and we turn off the reference file display. So it's starting to look a little bit cluttered here in the 2D. So this is basically references back in the 3D model to the 2D. So this is the 3D here that all these interval drops, which is sometimes can get cluttered. Right? This is a preliminary one, so it spaces them out pretty well. The feature definition spaces them out, but once you go to final, this has a lot of lines going across here, and it's just hard to see. So just to clean it up, I'm going to open up the level display manager. So here in Home tab, level display right here. And I'm just going to right click on the 3D reference and check display to turn the display off of that. And then I'm going to close that. And since I changed display settings, I'm going to go ahead and save settings, so I don't have to do that again. Let's see. So that's a little bit cleaner. And you do see the handles in here. So there's two sets of handles, I should say. There's a template drop handle, which is this boundary, and then on the ends, only on the ends is a template drop. You see a long handle. So here it's on one side, here it's on the other side, these long handles. That's the template drop handle. This one's short enough. It only has 1/4 handle on the end. But if you look at the longer sections, the quarter handle, you see these little short handles here. So these are on the ends and happens to overlap with the template drop, but these quarter handles are also along it every couple hundred feet or so. So it's just good to know. Sometimes you have to select a template handle versus a quarter handle. So it's good to know the difference between the two. They are also on different levels. So this is a quarter handle stage 1, and this is a template drop handle stage 1. So if you need to turn levels on and off, you can always do that as well. Okay, so if you notice over here, we do not have any medians yet, all right? In the 3D, it's just pavement. There's no medians, no traffic separators. So we need to add those in, and we're going to add a corridor reference to reference in the 2D line work so it can pick that up. And the template's already set to look for it, but it doesn't find it until we add those items as a corridor reference. So these are based on feature definition. So if you hover over one of these traffic separator lines, about in the middle of that pop-up there, it says feature, and it's got the whole path. It's traffic separator concrete 4 foot wide. So that template has a horizontal feature constraint that's set to look for that feature definition. When it finds it, it says, okay, this is when I switch from just pavement going across here to having a traffic separator. Similar for the median here. So this is set to look for curb gutter type E. And when it finds it, it builds the median. And also it needs the pavement asphalt EOP. So we're going to make a selection set of these features. So I'm just going to select, there's only a handful, so I'm just going to select them manually. So I'm selecting this traffic separator line. I'm going to come over to element selection and hit the little plus so I can add to my selection set. I'm going to select this traffic separator line. And then I'm going to select all these edge of pavement lines. So you got to get the taper and then the tangent section both. So there'll be 3 in this area that you need to select for edge of pavement. And also for the curb, we just need to face a curb, the curb gutter type E. So we got this line, we have the tangent on this side, and then we have the tangent on this side. So 3 lines of curb gutter over there. Then zoom in to this section, the taper area. Let's get those 2 taper lines. So we got the edge of pavement and the curb and gutter on the taper, and then the 2 traffic separator lines. Both of those. All right, so there's my selection set. That's step 1 of exercise 2.3. So now I can add these as a corridor reference. So I go back to my corridors tab. And then I want to go to add corridor reference tool. So that's over here under miscellaneous. And because it's got a drop down, it's a split button. I'm going to just click the split. And you can see this first command is add corridor reference. So I'm just going to click that. It asks me to locate the corridor. So I'm just going to grab one of these corridor handles. This one actually doesn't matter if you select, it'll let you select the template handles too. But I'm just going to grab the corridor handles since it's asking for a corridor. And now it says data point to apply references to 12 selected elements. If your number is different, it's probably just because you didn't add some as a selection set. You can go ahead and run it and then rerun the command to add the ones that are missing. So I'm going to data point to apply to 12 selected elements. So just left click. And you can see some changes happened over here. Okay. It's not quite what it needs to be, but it's getting there. So the first thing you notice, the most obvious thing is these white lines here. So these are the search lines that I was telling you. There's in conditions that's looking for the median, looking for the traffic separator, and because it found it, it builds it. We don't want to see those though, so what we can do is just go to these are constructions. So if we go here to view attributes in the 3D view, click the drop down on that. I can just turn off constructions right here. There is also a shortcut for that on the keyboard. It's F7. So if you just hit F7, it toggles it on and off. So now I can see my traffic separator is there. My median is there. There's some gaps, but don't worry about it. We'll clean that up. Don't worry. Also, it's going to be elevated above there. We're also going to clean that up. That's as designed. So don't worry about that either. That just makes the template cleaner by putting it up in the air so you can see it in the template editor, but we have to drop it down. If you do that, we're going to drop it down with a parametric constraint. So the first thing towards cleaning up these gaps, the first thing we can do is change the corridor feature definition. So if you open up Explorer here, so top left button here on the ribbon, Explorer. You can also hit F11 to bring it up. It's a keyboard shortcut. And mine's docked over here. I think by default it's docked over here on the left side. So we want to go to, this is, we're in exercise 2.4, is this step number 2. We're going to the open road standards section. So that's, depends on how wide this is. This tab may move around. It may not be in the exact same spot, but so just look through the tabs for open road standards. And then expand out, hit the little triangle here to expand that out. And we want to expand out libraries in this case. Step 3 here. Sometimes it takes a second when you expand the libraries one because it's trying to load all DGN Live and see what all it has. And then we want to expand out feature definitions, the first one on the list. And the FDOT standards features, expand that out. And then, these are corridor feature definitions. So come down to corridor. And here's a list of all the ones. These are all the ones that are delivered by FDOTConnect. So right now we've set it as preliminary. If you remember, when we did the new template drop command. The new corridor command, it asked you for the feature definition. We just left it as default. We didn't touch it, but it was set to preliminary. So you can go ahead and set it there, but preliminary is usually good for when you first build it. Then when you're going into details, you may switch it to final. So if you look at properties for this one, if I right click and bring up properties on preliminary, you can see that over here, if you look under processing and critical sections, there's a template drop interval multiplier of 5. So what this means is when we set that to 20-foot template drop, it multiplies that out by 5 and it puts in 100-foot for this feature definition, which is why these are messed up, these transitions, because they're shorter than 100 feet. They're only 50 feet long for the curb lane tapers. I'm sorry, for the turn lane tapers. So it puts the interval there, it's full width. It puts the interval here, and it's somewhere in the middle of it, and says, well, I don't know what's happening in between because I'm not putting intervals there. So I know here it's shifted over. So we can do some of that with key stations. You can add key stations at the key points as well if you want to clean it up without changing the feature definition. But at the end of the day, we're eventually going to change that feature definition as you go through. So having the looser interval, remember I said the tighter the interval, it has a performance impact. So preliminary is good to start with, set everything up, start laying things out, start building even some of your details on preliminary. And you might go to say your 30% design on preliminary even, unless you need to see more detail for some reason, in which case you might want to switch to the design one. So this one has a template drop interval multiplier as well, but it's 2. So it's not as tight. And then we have the final one, which has an interval multiplier of 1. So it's going to be that multiplier that you set. It's going to be that drop interval that you set. No multiplication. And it has the densify horizontal option set, which I think the design does too. But there's some other options in here where it just picks up points and adds them for final. So final's going to be tighter beyond simply the template drop interval. So it'll pick up some of the changes, some of the differences. So it's useful there. Let's see here. So we need to change this one. There's a couple ways to change it. I can do it from Explorer, but I'm going to do it by grabbing the handle since it's just the one corridor. So if you look for one of these short corridor handles, just select it. And since I was using the selection set, I got to switch over here back to new. So if you select it and then you hover over it, or sometimes you just hover over it, it'll bring it up. Selecting sometimes helps. I usually end up doing that way. And then the first option is properties. in this little menu that comes up. So I'm going to select that, and here's my feature definition right here. It's set to preliminary. So if I click the drop down here, I'm going to change that to 3 final, which is step 5 on the exercise. And notice in the 3D, it changed. There's a lot more interval drops in here. This cleaned up pretty well. It looks like it has that transition. And let's look at it down here. It cleaned up pretty well too. There's still a little gap in there, so we'll fix that. But for most part, it looks a lot better just by switching to final. So let's go clean up those gaps, and that's going to be exercise 2.5. So I'm going to change this to top view, just to make it easier to see what we're doing here. And now also we don't see that vertical shift because that's we're going to fix it, but I just want to do this first. So what's happening here is, so usually end up with gaps where you have transitions. Say for example, like you saw in the preliminary where this was longer, it didn't have a point right here. Well, now it does, and that cleaned it up. So simply adding a key station at the points where the 2D geometry that's referenced in transitions sometimes is enough, but there's no transition here on the 2D geometry. This is actually a transition in the template where this line here, which I think is the center of the ditch, center of the swale, shifts over because of this transition. But it eventually, if you kind of project it out from here, at some point it hits the curb. So that's what's causing the break, because we got one here, and somewhere between this between these two intervals, this line is hitting. So we don't know where that spot is. So basically we can guess on that in order to clean it up. For this end over here, there's another gap. So this one is more likely a transition related. So it's where this traffic separator ends and it switches to pavement. So we'll add key stations for both of those to clean that up. All right, so first command, add key station. We're gonna go over here and look for the key icon. So it's hidden in the edits menu. So if you're under corridors, we're in the corridors tab, switch to it if you're not in that one. And the edits section, click on the little drop down on the edits. Don't click the button, click the drop down. And the second option in the list is create key station. There's our yellow key icon next to it. So I'm going to select that. It asked me to select the corridor. So I'm going to grab one of these corridor handles here. And then it's just asking for a station. Now I can do this in the 2D. But notice if you look in the 3D, there's a cursor moving around there as well that represents it. So it's probably more useful if I just move over to the 3D, and this is why I switched to top-down view, so I can eyeball where this needs to be. So this line is going out from here. It hits somewhere in this area, so I'm going to put a key station around here. See what it does. See, there we go. It got close. It closed up most of that gap. It's still somewhere between here and here where that transition happens. We don't know exactly where. So I can just stay in this command and add some more. It's asked me to locate the corridor again. Let me zoom out and find one of these corridor handles. And it's, at the end of the day, sometimes it's difficult to figure out exactly where it is. So I'm just going to put it in the middle here, right between those two. And it closed it up. See, it came up this way. So it's still somewhere between these. So here's something that you can do. And this is also, if you skip down to exercise 2.6, review corridor objects. So we're going to do this corridor objects tool. It's over here on the top right of the edit section in the corridors tab. the little bucket icon. So click on corridor objects, and then I see locate the corridor. So I'm going to grab one of these corridor handles here, and then it opens up this window for us. So here's my template drops. The first one is useful because you see all your template drops here that are part of the corridor. You can see the template names. If you need to change anything, you can even change them from right here. You can change the start and end station as well. Now we're interested right now in the key stations. So let's click on key stations. And there's the two that we just added, okay? So what I want to do is actually edit those rather than adding a bunch more. Because remember, even a key station is going to have some impact on performance. So I'd rather just not have more than I need. I want them, we really need it right at that transition. So I've got 81.98, 83.97. So the first one is this one. And then that's the last one I placed. So I'm going to change this value here to 83.97 and just kind of split the difference. So basically it's 82 to 84. So I'll just make it 83 even. And I'm just going to type that in right here. So there you go, got a little bit closer. The other thing you can do with this is you can do graphical edits. So I'm going to kind of play leapfrog, switching back and forth between these two, make each one closer until it gets as tight as I want it. Actually, yeah, so right now it's still a foot off, so it's a foot gap. So we can certainly tighten that up more. So if you click over here as if you were going to edit it in this, and you can type in and edit things right here. I can say, okay, let's change that to 82. The only caveat is when you want to do a graphical edit, you need to select it over here. It won't work when you select it over here. So select it over here as if you're going to edit the station value by typing it in, and then come up here to this little pointer icon and choose it says make graphical edit, and then it's editing that field instead of typing it in. It's going to edit by however you select. So I'm just going to eyeball it here and just put it in the middle, see what that does. So you can see it jumped over, and the gap is now wider because I went past it. All right, so now this key station is redundant, the higher value. So somewhere between 82 and 82.5. So if I then change this, I can say, let's change the 83 to 82.25. Whoops, I did something wrong. I'm just going to do a graphical edit and put it in the middle there. I must have typed it wrong. It went down to 600. Okay, so now let me change it back. So 82.25. So there we go. It's still so it's somewhere between 82 and 82.25 because it's still coming on the left side or on this side of it. So let me change the 82.5 one down to 82.15. So it's somewhere between 82.15 and 82. So let's make this 82.1. You can go as precise as you want, but now, so there it is. It's now down to 500ths. That's pretty precise. I'm not going to worry about the gap any more than that. Usually a tenth is probably sufficient. You can probably get it more precise than that. The problem is we got nothing to snap to. So at the end of the day, it's just you can spend a lot of time on, changing the numbers and manually doing that. And you may have more key stations that you need to add. So we need to come down here to this one. And we're loosely following steps on 2.5 here. That one also shows adding key stations at the traffic separators, but this one looks okay. It's already got stations in there by switching to that final feature definition, so we don't really need any in there. We are going to need one down here, though. So if I just do, so I think we still have the corridor objects open. So I can also add new key stations directly from here. So if you're working with them like this is a little bit quicker because I don't have to select the corridor. It knows because I did it from the corridor objects. So I'm going to click this little add new button right here at the top left. And notice it doesn't ask me for the corridors. It knows what corridor I'm working on. So it looks like the transition needs to happen, needs one right here. Pardon me. It looks like it needs one right here at the end of the traffic separator. And that's the first place I'd look. I say, well, let's snap one right there. However, notice where the cursor is in the 3D. There's already an interval right there. So, and this is the nature of the transitions. So sometimes even if it drops an interval right on the point where the transition happens, it doesn't know what to do between that and the next interval because it doesn't know what's continuing. So it says, well, I give up. I don't know what I'm putting there. So it ends up with a gap. So what you do is you go towards the interval, towards the gap. So go into the gap a little bit. In this case, this is station 713 plus 87.21. So I can do it as tight as I want. I'll just go 0.22. Don't snap to anything. I'm just going to, so I'm going 100th of a foot in, and that key station, so it's right next to where there's another interval. And if you need to do this with key stations, you can have two key stations within 100th of a foot of each other to add that. So now that gap is still there, but it's now 100th of a foot. So it resolved it by saying, because, well, here's the next one. You don't know how to transition, but here's the next one. And it's minimizes the gaps, not an issue. So that's key stations. So just check around your project and see if you need to add any more. Like we could add another one here. There's a little gap. Just do add new and throw one in the middle. It's a pretty small gap. So I'm not going to worry a whole lot about it. So I just close it up more. This one I think is the same. It's the same issue as the other one. It's where this line transitions. So minimizing the gaps is mainly what you're trying to do. So minimize them that you can't see them. So if I rotate this back from the top down back to isometric, we can address this issue of the fact that these are up in the air. So we're going to do this by adding a parametric constraint. So we're going on to exercise 2.7. We already saw the corridor objects. The one thing I will point out too is parametric constraints. That's another corridor object. Okay, so you can select them. You can add them from here as well, and you'll see them once we add them. They'll be in this list. I'm going to just close this out, and we'll add that from the toolbar, so you can see where it is there without having that corridor objects open. All right, so exercise 2.7. Just to explain briefly the parametric constraints. So if you open the template, create template, you don't have to follow along on this. I'm just going to show it to you. So in templates, the corridor templates, we're looking at, let's look at the inside traffic separator. I'm going to turn off the point names. And I just made that active. And I switch over here to active template. And you can see your parametric constraints right here. These labels are set in the points. So these points here that are selected in blue when I select V offset have the parametric constraint label V offset. So the parametric constraint, I'm going to change that value to drop these down to 0 for all these points. So then if you edit one of these points, you can see here's this vector offset is set to -20, and it's V offset. And if I look at one of these other points, it's 20, and it's vertically above the left PGL. The left PGL is one of these points down here. So it's set to 20 feet up, and that's really just for display in here. So we're just going to put that parametric constraint to bring it back down to where it needs to be, because this switches between pavement across there or traffic separator. If I had these showing on top of each other, it would be very hard to edit the template. So we just have it up in the air. So I'm going to close that, and the other template has the same labels, that V offset label. So that's what we're going to use for these parametric constraints. So if we go to step 1 of exercise 2.7, we'll look for that parametric constraint tool. So this is also in the edits menu. So it's drop down. It's notice the button changed because it's the last used tool, was create key station. So we need a different tool in this menu. We're going to need to create parametric constraint. It's right about in the middle here. And it asked me to locate the corridor. So grab one of these handles. And it asked me for start and stop stations. So what we're going to do, if you look at step 3, I want to actually lock it to start. So I'm just going to hit the Alt key. Notice in the prompt here it says Alt, lock to start. So Alt will lock it. Notice also here that it checked this box, lock to start. So that's the other way you can do it. So I need a lock to the end. So I'm just going to check this box here to lock it to the end. This just means it's going for the full length of the corridor. So rather than just being a partial length, you can do it like if you just need a parametric constraint for a driveway or some other purpose. You may just have it for a range and you need to snap to something, you can do that. But in this case, it's for the full length of the project to bring these down. And then select the constraint label. So click the drop down right here. And we're going with that V underscore offset. Next to the last one here. And I'm going to go ahead and accept that start and end station and the label. Now change, before you accept anything else, change the start and stop values to 0. Start is 0 and stop is 0. So it changed it to 20 because that's what it is already. But we need to change it to 0. So there you go. It dropped down to where it should be. So you can look around and see, make sure everything still looks okay. It shouldn't have affected the key stations or anything. So it looks pretty good. It's we're there. You know, if you rotate, you can see this is in 3D. So now we're pretty much ready to build the outside. So that's going to be another part. So that wraps up for this file. I'm going to go ahead and save settings so that if I open this again, it'll save whatever changes I made. You want to pause? Thank you for joining me today for the CAD Office series for FDOTConnect. This was the first part of Chapter 2 on basic corridor modeling of the FDOTConnect Roadway Design 3D Modeling Guide.